Today we're here talking about blended learning and the administrator's role in coaching teachers and staff and facilitating blended learning experiences with our students. And we're really excited to have Miss Jill Angelucci with us today. Jill is an assistant principal at George Rogers Clark High School in Clark County. Jill, thanks so much for being willing to share some of your journey with us today. Hey, I heard you talk recently about how you and the staff at GRC navigated this process, and I think there's some great takeaways for all of us across the state. So do you mind to tell us a little bit about your experience at George Rogers Clark and how all of this came together?
Sure, yeah. So we had been in virtual learning for about 3 months. This was like October, November of 2020. And I had a teacher approach me and ask just to kind of hear, he said, I just want to know what's going on in the building, what kinds of things people are doing. I know there's some really great things going on, and I just haven't had an opportunity to see because some teachers were in the building, some were not. And just to kind of share the positive things that were going on and that teachers had found that were working for them. So I went ahead and I set up a virtual meeting with our staff and kind of put out an all call. Whoever wanted to join could in this conversation. And we had about 18 teachers join that first meeting. I had an agenda set up to talk about synchronous and asynchronous, but most of the time was really spent in breakout rooms with teachers just discussing what was working for them. And we set some ground rules, the main one being that this was a conversation about what was working. We were not going to be talking about what wasn't working during this meeting. We knew there were a lot of things that weren't working and some systems we had in place that we needed to change, but this was not the time, this was not that meeting. So this meeting was really focused on what was working for teachers. And teachers recorded their conversations in a Google Sheet, just kind of had some guided questions that they were following, and so that everybody could kind of see what each group had talked about. And then from there, it kind of came out in that first meeting that we really had some teachers who had learned a lot about Google Classroom and the nuances of Google Classroom and what was working for them. And as they were sharing, other teachers were saying, I didn't know that, I had no idea. So things like, if you put a 0 in for an assignment, it doesn't show up in a student's to-do list because it's not missing anymore. Other things like students are not, at the high school level at least, are not really getting on to the teacher's streams. So all those announcements they were putting in that students weren't really even seeing, they were just strictly working off their to-do list. So how to make sure that your Google Classroom was organized in a way that was easy for students to navigate. And so we came up with 5 best practices that we felt we really wanted to share with all of the teachers that they thought would be helpful for everybody. And created through Canva just a document of our 5 best practices for Google Classroom. And then teachers really kind of wanted to know a little bit more about each practice. So all of those link to a Google Doc that kind of explains everything a little bit more if it's not clear through just the small description. And then we met one more time as a large group and kind of saw the need for some smaller groups. So we had a group teachers could sign up for to participate if they wanted to in one of the small groups, what they felt like they were most comfortable doing, whether it was synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, or communication with our virtual students. So that was kind of focused around, we had a lot of hard to reach kids and a lot of teachers doing a really good job reaching those kids, and then a lot that were struggling to do so. So each of those groups kind of came up with their top 5 best practices for those areas, and then a little bit more, descriptions of each. So, and just a little disclaimer that these are not best practices in general or what will work for everybody or research-based by any means. These were just kind of what was working for our teachers and what they felt like they wanted to share with their colleagues.
Hey, thanks for sharing that. And I will throw a disclaimer back at you that a lot of those practices are research or, practitioner based, best practices. So now trying to connect that to, thinking from the administrator lens, the framework for teaching, used for evaluation, used for some coaching experiences, with you and the staff. But sometimes digital strategies become hard to connect to the framework for some administrators, but I see a ton of connections here, and I know you do too. So, particularly maybe around components like 1D and 4E. So How do you think this helped your staff kind of grow in their understanding of those components? And then, how did it give you the opportunity to coach and then have more evidence, maybe than normal?
Sure. So 1D, knowledge of resources, this whole process really allowed teachers to share resources that they had become proficient in and were using with their own students, in order to kind of expand everybody's toolkit, um, and exposure to their resources. So it kind of led to some further professional development sessions that our teachers have been leading, and just kind of sharing what was working for them has been, and also for me to learn from them about these resources. So, for example, we had one teacher present on Edpuzzle recently, and that's the program that a lot of teachers have latched onto, but not everybody. And so that's kind of gave exposure to these other teachers to see what that was about, and also administrators. So as we're coaching, we can kind of say either, hey, you should check out this teacher's classroom, or just finding ways to best fit that into their own lessons, whether synchronous or asynchronous. And then 4E, allowing teachers to grow professionally, we've started this thing called Think Tank Thursdays. Through this process of sharing, teachers have continued to want to share more. So we're setting up a system at once a month where we have a professional development meeting in the morning, and that it's led by teachers for teachers. So teachers have an opportunity to sign up to present a 30-minute session on whatever they want to share, whatever they feel like is working well. So one teacher presented on Edpuzzle. We had another kind of just present on forming relationships during virtual learning, and how she's doing that and how that works, the different things she's doing that she wanted to share. Another presented on hyperdocs and how she's using those. So it's really allowing teachers who have never had an opportunity to present before really shine and share what's working for them. And then it's allowing other teachers to learn from them. So it's really creating kind of a culture shift in the school of just sharing and finding ways that we can, as a school as a whole, become better with what we're using and how we're using it.
Absolutely. That's a lot of teacher leadership, opportunities. And you're right. So often they're not given that opportunity. So this has been a huge growth, I think, in that area. I think you're exactly right. And connecting the use of some of the tools like Edpuzzle that you mentioned, and how it connects to maybe some pieces of Domain 3. So I think those are great pieces. And so, and speaking of frameworks, and you mentioned about, how you were growing in this process, there's this little thing called PCL standards for administrators. And so, there's a lot of connections to your personal growth inside this PCL, standards document. And so I'm kind of curious, and maybe you could share like how you think this experience relates to a specific standard potentially, and then maybe how it helped you live that out with your staff.
Sure. I think it connects really well to Standard 7, which is fostering a professional community of teachers. This has kind of allowed me and the other school administrators to put a system in place to design and implement some job-embedded professional growth opportunities, which are teacher-led, for everybody to kind of learn collaboratively with one another. We're trying to provide opportunities for feedback for teachers, from us and then also from one another. But really the whole point is to just promote, allowing teachers to share in order to promote student success. So how is this connecting to our students, and what's the best thing for our students, and really kind of allowing teachers to shine in that area, sharing what's working for them. The Think Tank Thursdays is something we hope to continue past the virtual learning, and as we come back and really kind of move into the blended learning model. How are we taking what we've learned from being completely virtual, now coming back in person? How can we take the best pieces of that and kind of make it that blended learning model? So I'm excited to see if we have some 5 best practices for that, or if teachers just continue to present and share with one another on what's working for them.
Jill, I think that's a tremendous connection. And the best part is student success is in the middle of all that. So your growth, the staff growth, all aimed at moving students and giving them new opportunities. So I think that's a great connection. So there's a ton to take away there. And I want to remind folks that the resources, some that you've mentioned, will be available in this module as part of the resources section, along with a slide that has some of your contact information in case they have any questions about Think Tank Thursday or any other coaching strategies and products that you guys use. So Jill, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.